The schoolhouse door splintered against the frame as 6'8" Gareth Ironstone shouldered his way through, rainwater streaming from his leather coat and hat brim, casting shadows across his granite jaw. 3 pairs of young eyes turned toward the giant who filled the doorway like a storm cloud. But he saw only one, the woman with fire-copper hair who stood frozen at the blackboard, chalk dust on her fingers and defiance blazing in her emerald eyes. Callista Bramblewood, his voice rumbled through the one-room schoolhouse like distant thunder. I need a wife, and you need strong sons. The children gasped, but Callista's chin lifted another notch. She'd heard about Gareth Ironstone, the mysterious rancher who'd appeared in Willowbrook Valley 3 years ago with nothing but a horse, a rifle, and enough gold to buy the largest spread in 3 counties. Rumors swirled around him like prairie dust. Some said he'd been a cavalry officer. Others whispered he'd run from something darker than war. Mr. Ironstone, she said, her voice steady, despite the wild hammering of her heart. You're interrupting my arithmetic lesson. A ghost of a smile touched his weathered lips. Arithmetic won't keep you warm when winter comes, Miss Bramblewood. Won't give you children to fill that empty house your father left you. Won't stop the bank from taking what's yours when you can't make the payments. Heat flooded her cheeks. How dare he speak of her private struggles in front of her students? But even as anger sparked through her, she couldn't deny the truth in his words. Teaching brought her $20 a month, barely enough to keep food on her table, let alone maintain her father's property or pay the mounting debts. Children, she said, without breaking eye contact with the giant early dismissal today, please gather your things quietly. The students needed no second invitation. They scrambled for their books and lunch pails, whispering excitedly as they fled past Gareth's imposing figure. Only when the last child disappeared down the muddy road did Callista set down her chalk and face him fully. You have some nerve, Mr. Ironstone. I have a proposition. He stepped deeper into the room, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden floor. I've got 10,000 acres, the finest cattle in the territory, and a house that echoes with emptiness. You've got more learning than any woman in 500 miles, and you're 26 years old with no prospects in sight. No prospects? The words came out sharper than she intended. Name one man in this valley brave enough to court a woman who can outread, outthink, and outstubborn him. His eyes held hers steadily. Name one who could give you the sons you'll need to carry on your father's name. Something raw and painful twisted in her chest. He was right, and they both knew it. The few unmarried men in Willowbrook Valley either treated her like a curiosity or avoided her altogether. Her intelligence intimidated them. And what makes you think I want sons? She asked, though her voice had lost some of its edge. Because you look at my cattle through your schoolhouse window every morning, and I see the hunger in your eyes. Not for beef, but for legacy. For something that will outlast you. Moved closer. Close enough that she caught the scent of leather and pine and something indefinably masculine. I can give you that, Callista Bramblewood, but only if you're brave enough to take it. Rain drummed against the schoolhouse windows as Callista stared at the man who'd just turned her carefully ordered world upside down. Gareth Ironstone stood before her like something carved from the mountains themselves, all hard angles and weathered strength, with eyes the color of winter storm clouds. You're proposing marriage to a woman you barely know, she said, wrapping her arms around herself. That's either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. I know enough. His voice carried that same rumbling authority that had commanded attention from her students. I know you've been teaching here for 4 years without missing a single day, even when you had pneumonia last winter. I know you ride out to the Morrison homestead every Sunday to teach their youngest boy to read because he can't make it to school. I know you split your own firewood and mended your own roof when the storm hit in April. Her eyes widened. You've been watching me? This is a small valley, Miss Bramblewood. Hard not to notice when someone cares more about others than herself. He stepped closer, his massive frame somehow making the spacious schoolroom feel intimate. I also know your father's debts come due in 3 months, and Marshal Hickory's been asking questions about your property taxes. The blood drained from her face. She'd hoped no one else knew about the marshal's visits, about the increasingly desperate letters from the territorial bank. How do I make it my business to know what affects this valley? Your father was a good man, but he was no businessman. The debts he left you would crush most men, let alone a woman trying to make do on a teacher's salary? Anger flared again, hot and defensive. I'll manage. I've been managing. By wearing dresses you've mended so many times, there's more patch than original fabric. By eating nothing but beans and hardtack most nights. By burning furniture when you can't afford coal. His eyes gentled slightly. Pride's a luxury you can't afford much longer, Callista. She turned away, staring out at the rain-soaked valley where his cattle grazed in the distance. And what exactly are you offering, Mr. Ironstone? To pay my debts in exchange for services? I'm offering partnership. The word hung between them, heavy with possibility. A real marriage, with all that entails. My name, my protection, my resources. In return, you bring your intelligence, your strength, and your children. Sons who will carry on what we build together. If we have daughters. A smile ghosted across his lips. Then God help any man who tries to court them without my approval. Despite herself, Callista felt her mouth twitch. But the practical part of her mind, the part that had kept her afloat these past months, demanded answers. Why me? You could have your pick of younger women, prettier women, women who'd be grateful for the chance and wouldn't ask difficult questions. Because I don't want a grateful wife. I want an equal one. He moved to stand beside her at the window, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his large frame. I want a woman who'll challenge me when I'm wrong, stand beside me when I'm right, and be strong enough to hold this ranch together if something happens to me. You speak as if you expect danger. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Danger has a way of finding men like me, Miss Bramblewood. I won't lie to you about that. No. She studied his profile, the sharp cheekbones, the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, as if watching for threats. What are you running from, Gareth Ironstone? For a long moment, he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but steady. The past, same as everyone who comes west, looking for a new start. And you think marriage will give you that new start? I think you will. He turned to face her fully, his storm cloud eyes intense. I think we could build something worth having together, something worth protecting. The rain began to ease and weak sunlight filtered through the clouds. In the distance, his cattle moved across the grassland like dark shadows against the green. It was beautiful land, rich and wild and full of promise. I need time to think, she said finally. How much time? A week. He nodded once, sharp and decisive. 1 week, but Callista. He moved toward the door, then paused. Don't think too long about what you might lose. Think about what you might gain. Callista spent the next 3 days unable to eat, sleep, or concentrate on her lessons. Every time she looked out the schoolhouse window, she saw Gareth's cattle grazing peacefully in the distance, and his words echoed in her mind. Think about what you might gain. On Thursday evening, she was splitting kindling behind her small house when hoofbeats announced a visitor. Her heart jumped as she recognized Gareth's massive black stallion, but it wasn't the rancher who dismounted. Instead, a weathered woman, with silver-streaked hair and knowing eyes, approached the woodpile. You must be Callista Bramblewood, the woman said, extending a calloused hand. I'm Cordelia Fairweather, Gareth's housekeeper. Though housekeeper doesn't quite cover it, you've been running that boy's life for the better part of 3 years. Callista set down her axe, wiping her hands on her apron. Mrs. Fairweather, I've heard your name mentioned in town. Nothing too scandalous, I hope. Cordelia's eyes twinkled with mischief. Mind if we talk? Woman to woman, as they settled on the small porch with cups of weak tea, the evening air thick with the scent of prairie grass and distant wood smoke. For several minutes they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. He's a good man, Cordelia said finally. Complicated, maybe. Haunted by things he won't talk about. But good. Why are you telling me this? Because I've watched him for 3 years, and I've never seen him look at anything the way he looks at you. Cordelia sipped her tea thoughtfully. Like your water, and he's been dying of thirst. Heat flooded Callista's cheeks. Mrs. Fairweather, Cordelia. And before you get all flustered, hear me out. The older woman leaned forward, her expression serious. That ranch is too big for one man, too lonely for anyone with a heart. Gareth needs someone to share it with, someone strong enough to be a true partner. But more than that, he needs someone to remind him what he's fighting for. Fighting for? His past child. It's coming for him, sure as winter follows autumn. I can see it in the way he watches the horizon, the way he keeps that rifle loaded. By the front door, he's preparing for something, and when it comes, he'll need someone beside him who won't break under pressure. A chill ran down Callista's spine. What kind of past? Cordelia was quiet for a long moment. Not my story to tell. But I will say this. Whatever he did, whatever brought him here, he's paid for it 10 times over. The man I know would die before he'd let harm come to someone under his protection. And you think I need protecting? I think you're about to lose everything you've worked for, and pride won't keep you warm when winter comes. Cordelia's voice was gentle but uncompromising. Your daddy left you a burden no woman should have to carry alone. Gareth's offering to share it. That night, Callista lay awake staring at the ceiling, Cordelia's words mixing with her own desperate thoughts. In the darkness, she could admit what she'd been trying to ignore. She was attracted to Gareth's ironstone in ways that terrified her. The way he'd filled the doorway of her schoolhouse, is the quiet authority in his voice, it's the promise of strength and protection he represented. But it was more than physical attraction. There was something in his eyes when he looked at her. Something that suggested depths she'd only glimpsed. A hunger that matched her own, not just for companionship, but for understanding. For someone who could see past the surface to the real person underneath. Friday morning brought unexpected visitors to men in dusty suits and official badges who introduced themselves as federal marshals. They asked questions about Gareth. Ironstone. Questions that made Callista's stomach twist with anxiety. Had she noticed anything unusual about his behavior? Any suspicious visitors? Any large amounts of cash or gold? She answered honestly, no, and no, but their visit left her shaken. What had Gareth done? What was he hiding? And what would happen to her if she tied her fate to his? That evening, she walked to the edge of her property and stood looking across the valley toward his ranch. Smoke rose from the chimney of the large house, and lights glowed warmly in the windows. It looked solid, permanent. Safe everything her own precarious existence was not, as if summoned by her thoughts, a rider emerged from the gathering dusk. Gareth approached slowly, giving her time to retreat if she chose. Instead, she stayed. Where she was, her heart hammering as he dismounted and walked toward her. Cordelia said you had visitors today, he said without preamble. Federal marshals? They were asking about you. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look surprised. What did you tell them? The truth. That I barely know you. She studied his face. In the fading light, but that's about to change, isn't it? Whatever's coming, whatever you're afraid of, it's getting closer. Yes, the single word held a weight of resignation and determination. Which is why I need to know your answer, Callista. Not in for more days. Now. The silence stretched between them like a taut rope, filled with everything unsaid and everything at stake. Gareth stood motionless, his powerful frame silhouetted against the dying light, while Callista fought the war raging inside her heart. They're marshals, she said finally. They're not the first to come looking for you, are they? No. His honesty was brutal and complete, and they won't be the last. Did you do? For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he removed his hat, running his fingers through his dark hair. During the war, I served under Colonel Marcus Blackthorne in a unit that officially didn't exist. We did necessary things, but things that left marks on a man's soul. After Appomattox, some of us tried to go home, tried to forget, but Blackthorne had other ideas. Callista's breath caught. She'd heard whispers of Colonel Blackthorne, a Union officer who'd supposedly gone rogue after the war, using his connections and his men for increasingly questionable purposes. He wanted us to continue our work in peacetime. Private contracts, he called them. Wealthy men with problems that needed ... solving. When I refused, when I took my share of our accumulated gold and disappeared west, he made it clear that desertion wouldn't be tolerated. So you stole from him. I took what was mine by right. But Marcus never saw it that way. He's been sending men after me for 3 years, getting closer each time. Gareth's eyes met hers steadily. The marshals who visited you today, they're not federal marshals. They're Blackthorn's men with forged credentials. The blood drained from her face. It seemed so official. Marcus was always good at that, making the unofficial seem legitimate until it was too late to matter. He stepped closer, his voice urgent. Callista, I won't lie to you about the danger. If you marry me, you'll be a target. But if you don't, the debts will destroy. Me anyway, she finished quietly. Not just the debts. When Blackthorn comes, and he will come, he'll use anyone he thinks might have value to me. Your connection to me puts you at risk whether you accept my proposal or not. She stared out across the valley, her mind racing. Everything she'd built. Here, everything she'd worked for, balanced on the edge of a knife. What kind of life are you offering me, Gareth? Always looking over our shoulders, always waiting for the past to catch up. I'm offering you a chance to fight instead of just surviving, a chance to build something worth defending. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. I won't pretend it will be easy. Your butt, I will promise. No one will ever touch you while I draw breath. The fierce protectiveness in his voice sent shivers through her. She'd been alone for so long, responsible for herself and no one else to depend on. The idea of having someone strong, enough to stand between her and the world, was both terrifying and intoxicating. And children? She asked. You spoke of sons. How can you ask me to bring children into this danger? Because the alternative is no children at all. No future, no legacy, no hope. His hand found hers, large and warm and steady. This valley could be paradise for the right family, Callista. Safe, prosperous, peaceful once we've dealt with the ghosts from my past. And if we can't deal with them, then at least we'll face them together. She looked down at their joined hands, her pale, slender fingers intertwined with his scarred, powerful ones. The contrast was striking, but somehow they fit together perfectly. The marshal's visit shook you, she said. Yes. It means Blackthorn's getting desperate, taking bigger risks, which means the endgame is approaching. His thumb traced across her knuckles. I'd hoped for more time to court you properly, to let you get to know me gradually. But time is a luxury we no longer have. Court me properly. Despite everything, she felt her lips curve slightly. Is that what you call breaking down my schoolhouse door and declaring your intentions in front of 23 children? I call that desperation. His answering smile was rueful, though I admit, subtlety has never been my strong suit. Last, light faded from the sky, leaving them wrapped in starlit darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, wild and lonely. Callista thought of her empty house, her mounting debts, her shrinking options. Then she thought of the warmth in Gareth's eyes, the strength in his hands, the promise of partnership he offered. If I say yes, she said carefully, what happens next? We marry immediately. Tomorrow, if possible, then we prepare for war. And if I say no, then I'll respect your decision. But I'll also station men around your property, because Blackthorn won't care about your choice. To him, you're already a weakness he can exploit. She pulled her hand free, needing space to think. The practical part of her mind cataloged all the reasons this was madness, marrying a man she barely knew, accepting a life of danger, abandoning the careful independence she'd worked so hard to maintain. But her heart whispered something different. It whispered of possibilities, of partnership, of the fierce attraction she'd been trying to deny. It whispered of strong hands that could hold her safe and strong arms that could hold her close. Callista. Her name on his lips was a prayer and a plea. What's your answer? She turned to face him fully, her decision crystallizing with startling clarity. Yes, Gareth Ironstone. I'll marry you. Dawn broke gray and threatening over Willowbrook Valley as Callista stood before her wardrobe, staring at the meager selection of dresses hanging within. Today she would marry a man she'd known for less than a week, bind her fate to his in ways that would change everything about her carefully ordered life. Her hands shook as she selected her best. dress deep blue wool, with tiny pearl buttons mended only twice and almost elegant in its simplicity. It would have to do. She had no family to witness the ceremony, no trousseau prepared, no rings exchanged with loving promises. Just a practical arrangement between two people who needed each other for very different reasons. Knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She opened it to find Cordelia Fairweather holding a large box wrapped in brown paper. From Gareth, the older woman said, pushing past her into the small parlor. He said, "You might need something appropriate for the occasion." Callista unwrapped the package with trembling fingers, gasping when she lifted the lid. Inside lay the most beautiful dress she'd ever seen, wreath silk with delicate lace sleeves and a skirt that would flow like water when she walked. Beneath it, wrapped in tissue, were silk stockings, pearl earrings, and a pair of leather boots so fine they might have come from Paris. "He couldn't have gotten this from town," she whispered. "Sent a rider to Denver 3 days ago," Cordelia replied, busying herself with arranging the dress on the bed. "Soon as he talked to you, he started making preparations. Man doesn't do anything halfway, but how did he know I'd say yes?" Cordelia's knowing smile made her cheeks burn. "Some things are written in the stars, child. Now stop gawking and get dressed. Preacher Conway's already at the ranch, and Gareth's wearing a hole in the floor with his pacing." An hour later, Callista sat in Gareth's wagon as they rolled toward his ranch house, her new dress rustling softly with each movement. The ivory silk made her feel like a stranger to herself, elegant, valuable, worthy of protection. She'd never owned anything so fine. "You look beautiful," Gareth said quietly, his eyes never leaving the road ahead. But she caught the way his hands tightened on the reins, the slight roughness in his voice that suggested her appearance affected him more than he cared to admit. The ranch house loomed before them, a massive structure of hewn logs and river stone, with wide porches and tall windows that gleamed in the morning light. It was larger than she'd imagined, built to house generations of families rather than one lonely man. "Elle needs a woman's touch," Gareth said, as if reading her thoughts. "Cordelia does her best, but she's more concerned with function than beauty." They were met at the front door by a small gathering preacher, Conway, with his worn Bible, Cordelia beaming with satisfaction, and 2 men Callista didn't recognize. Both wore the hard look of soldiers, their eyes constantly scanning for threats even. At their employer's wedding, "My foreman, Jasper Crow," Gareth introduced the taller of the two. "A lean man with prematurely gray hair and intelligent brown eyes, and my head of security, Tobias Flint." Callista shook their hands, noting the deference in their manner toward Gareth and the protective way they positioned themselves near the windows. These were more than employees, they were comrades in arms. Men who'd followed their leader into exile and would follow him through whatever came next. The ceremony itself was brief and businesslike. Preacher Conway spoke of the sanctity of marriage and the duties of husband and wife, while Callista struggled to focus on anything beyond the solid presence of the man beside her. When it came time for vows, Gareth's voice was steady and sure. "I, Gareth Ironstone, take you, Callista Bramblewood, to be my wife. I promise to protect you, provide for you, and honor you for as long as I draw breath." Her own voice trembled slightly. "I, Callista Bramblewood, take you, Gareth Ironstone, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you, support you, and be faithful to you through whatever may come." The ring he slipped onto her finger was a simple gold band, but it felt heavy with promise and responsibility. When Preacher Conway pronounced them man and wife, Gareth's kiss was gentle, almost hesitant to question rather than acclaim. After the others had offered their congratulations and departed, Callista found herself alone with her new husband in the spacious front parlor. Silence stretched between them, filled with awareness and uncertainty. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the right," Gareth said formally. "Cordelia's prepared everything you'll need. We can take things slowly. Get to know each other properly." Relief and disappointment warred in her chest. "And your room?" End of the hall. "But Callista," he stepped closer, his storm-gray eyes intense. "This marriage may have started as a practical arrangement, but I meant what I said in my vows. You're under my protection now, completely and permanently. No one will hurt you while I live." Before she could respond, Jasper Crow appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Boss, we've got company." 3 riders approaching from the east, moving fast. Gareth's entire demeanor changed, becoming harder, more dangerous. Men, most likely. They're not from around here. Callista's blood ran cold as Gareth strode to the gun cabinet, selecting a rifle with practiced efficiency. Tobias is already in position upstairs. "Get Mrs. Ironstone to the root cellar and stay." "With her?" "Mrs. Ironstone." Jasper's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." "Wait," Callista said, catching Gareth's arm. "What if they're real marshals this time?" His smile was sharp as winter. "Then they'll have proper identification and warrants." "Men never do." He cupped her face gently, the contrast between his tender touch and the deadly weapon in his other hand jarring. "Go with Jasper. No matter what you hear, don't come out until I come for you myself." As Jasper led her toward a concealed door behind the kitchen, Callista looked back to see her husband of 2 hours checking his ammunition with the cool efficiency of a man preparing for war. Her new life, it seemed, was about to begin with gunfire. Root cellar smelled of earth and stored vegetables, its stone walls thick enough to muffle sound from above. Callista sat on a wooden crate, her wedding dress incongruously elegant in the dim space, while Jasper Crow kept watch by the narrow stairs leading to the concealed entrance. "How often does this happen?" she whispered. "First time they've been bold enough to approach the house directly," Jasper replied, his hand resting on his holstered pistol. "Usually they probe around the edges, testing our defenses." Through the thick stone, she could hear the muffled sound of horses arriving, then voices too distant to make out words, but the tone was unmistakably hostile. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she thought of Gareth facing whatever threat had come calling on their wedding day. He's fought these men before? Different men, same employer. Colonel Blackthorn's got deep pockets and a long reach. When one team fails, he sends another. Jasper's weathered face was grim, but the boss is good at what he does. It's best I ever served under. A sharp crack echoed through the house above a gunshot that made Callista flinch, and another, followed by the sound of running feet and shouted orders. "Stay calm," Jasper said, though his own tension was evident in the way he gripped his weapon. House is built like a fortress. Thick walls, narrow windows, plenty of cover. More gunshots, rapid fire this time, punctuated by what sounded like breaking glass. Callista pressed her hands to her mouth to stifle a cry as she imagined Gareth crouched behind overturned furniture, trading bullets with killers who'd come to drag him back to whatever hell he'd escaped. "I should be up there," she said suddenly. "I should be helping you, should be exactly where you are." Jasper's voice was firm. "Boss doesn't need the distraction of worrying about your safety while he's fighting for his life." The battle above seemed to last forever, though it was probably only minutes. Gradually, the gunfire became more sporadic, then ceased altogether. The silence that followed was almost worse than the violence had been. "Is it over?" Callista breathed. "Before?" Jasper could answer. Heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs above. They both tensed, weapons ready, until a familiar voice called down, "It's me. All clear." Gareth appeared at the bottom of the stairs, and Callista's breath caught at the sight of him. His shirt was torn, blood seeping through the fabric at his shoulder, his face streaked with gunpowder and grim satisfaction. "Are you hurt?" She was on her feet before she realized it, reaching toward the spreading stain on his shirt, just a graze. Nothing Cordelia can't patch up. His eyes swept over her, checking for damage. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine."
"What happened?"
Up there, 3 men, just like Jasper spotted. They came with forged warrants and demands for my immediate surrender. His smile was sharp and cold. I declined their generous offer, and now 2 are dead. The 3rd is tied up in the barn, ready for questioning. He accepted the clean cloth Jasper offered, pressing it to his wounded shoulder. "We need to know how much Blackthorn knows about our defenses, about you." As a casual way he mentioned killing 2 men should have horrified her. Instead, Callista found herself oddly reassured by the deadly competence he'd displayed. These weren't innocent victims. They'd come to her new home with violence and threats, and her husband had defended what was his. Will more come? She asked. Eventually, but this buys us time to prepare. He studied her face carefully. Are you having second thoughts, Mrs. Ironstone? This is what your life will be like until Blackthorn is dealt with permanently? She lifted her chin, surprised by her own resolve. I knew what I was agreeing to. The question is, what do we do now? Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. Now we make this ranch into a fortress. We train you to defend yourself. We gather intelligence on Blackthorn's operations. We prepare for the war that's coming. Train me? You're my wife now. That makes you a target, but it also makes you a weapon if you're willing to learn. His eyes held hers steadily. I won't coddle you or pretend you're too delicate for this fight. If you're going to survive what's coming, you need to be able to protect yourself when I'm not there. Thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. All her life, she'd been told that ladies didn't handle weapons, didn't involve themselves in violence, didn't need to know such things. But looking at her new husband's bloody shirt, she realized those rules belonged to a world that no longer existed for her. When do we start? Gareth's smile was fierce and proud. Tomorrow. Tonight, we celebrate our wedding properly. Heat flooded her cheeks at the implication, but she didn't look away. She'd married this dangerous, complicated man. And despite everything, the violence, the threats, the uncertain future, she found herself wanting to discover what lay beneath. His controlled exterior, the prisoner in the barn, she said. What will you do with him? Learn everything he knows, then decide if he lives or dies based on what he tells us. His matter-of-fact tone sent chills down her spine. Does that bother you? She considered the question seriously. It should bother her. The woman she'd been yesterday would have been appalled. But the woman she'd become today? The woman who'd chosen to stand beside a man like Gareth Ironstone, understood that mercy could be a luxury they couldn't afford. Will you make him suffer unnecessarily? No, I'm not a sadist, Callista. Just a man protecting what's his. She nodded slowly. Then do what you must. As they climbed the stairs back to the main house, Callista caught sight of herself in a hallway mirror. The elegant woman in ivory silk looked like a stranger harder somehow, more determined. Gunfire had baptized her into a new life. She found herself ready to embrace whatever came next. Her marriage had begun with bullets and blood. Something told her it would continue the same way until one side or the other emerged victorious. Part 7. The final confrontation 3 months later. Callista could handle a rifle almost as well as she could handle a classroom full of unruly children. Her hands, once soft from a teacher's life, now bore calluses from target practice and the daily routines of ranch life. The ivory wedding dress hung in her wardrobe like a ghost of gentler times, replaced by practical riding clothes and boots that could withstand mud, blood, and whatever else their dangerous life demanded. The ranch had been transformed into a fortress. Gareth's men had dug defensive positions, established watch posts, and created supply caches throughout the property. What had once been a peaceful cattle operation now resembled a military compound preparing for siege, and siege was exactly what came on a cold November morning when 30 riders appeared on the horizon, moving with the discipline of trained soldiers. Blackthorn himself, Gareth said grimly, lowering his spyglass from the bedroom window. He's finally come to finish this personally. Callista checked her rifle one final time, surprised by how steady her hands remained. How many men do we have? 12. Counting us. It's not good odds, but we have the advantage of position and preparation. He turned to face her, his expression serious. Callista, there's still time. I could get you out through the back passage. No, her interruption was firm and immediate. We've been through this. I'm not leaving. For the past months. There. Marriage had evolved from practical arrangement to something deeper. What had begun as mutual need had grown into genuine partnership, respect, and something that felt remarkably like love. She'd discovered that beneath Gareth's dangerous exterior lay a man of honor, intelligence, and surprising gentleness. He'd discovered that beneath her ladylike facade lay steel that wouldn't bend under pressure. Then we do this together, he said, checking his weapons one final time. same as everything else. The attack began at dawn with a thunderous charge across the open ground. Blackthorn's men came in waves, professional soldiers who knew their business. But Gareth and his defenders had spent months preparing for this moment. The first wave broke against carefully placed obstacles and withering crossfire. From concealed positions, Callista found herself pressed against the upstairs window, a rifle speaking with deadly precision as she picked off riders trying to flank their position. The teacher, who had once fainted at the sight of blood, now calmly reloaded and continued, firing her shots guided by weeks of relentless practice. Second wave coming from the east. Jasper's voice carried across the compound as more riders swept around the barn, trying to overwhelm their defenses through sheer numbers. Gareth's answering roar rallied his men. Hold fast. Make every shot count. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one. Bodies littered the ground around the ranch house, most wearing Blackthorn's colors. But their own losses mounted too. Tobias Flint fell defending the kitchen entrance, and young Miguel Santos took a bullet in the leg while manning the barn's upper loft. Then, suddenly as it had begun, the shooting stopped. A white flag appeared at the edge of the property, and a single rider approached under its protection. Colonel Marcus Blackthorn was not what Callista had expected. Rather than the monster she'd imagined, he appeared to be a distinguished gentleman. In his 50s, silver-haired and immaculately dressed despite the morning's violence, only his eyes betrayed the coldness within pale blue chips of ice that seemed to calculate the value of everything they surveyed. Gareth Ironstone. His voice carried clearly across the yard. Enough good men have died today. Come out and face me like the soldier you once were. Gareth emerged from the house slowly, his rifle held ready, but not quite aimed at his former commander. Callista followed, despite his sharp look of disapproval, her own weapon cradled in her arms with deceptive casualness. Marcus Gareth's voice was steady, controlled. You're a long way from your comfortable office in Washington. You force my hand, old friend. 3 years of defiance, 3 years of killing my best men. It ends today.
Oh.
Blackthorn's eyes shifted to Callista with calculating interest. And this must be the schoolteacher wife I've heard so much about. Quite lovely, though I suspect she's more dangerous than she appears. Leave her out of this, Gareth said, stepping slightly forward to block Blackthorn's view. Oh, but she's very much part of this now. You see, Gareth, I've learned something interesting about your new wife. Her father wasn't just a failed businessman. He was also a federal judge who signed several warrants for my arrest before his unfortunate death. Callista's blood ran cold. She'd known her father had been involved in territorial law enforcement, but he'd never spoken of specific cases or enemies he might have made. Judge Ezekiel Bramblewood was quite the thorn in my side, Blackthorn continued, conversationally, always asking inconvenient questions about military contracts and missing supplies. It was almost a relief when his heart gave out so conveniently. You killed my father? The words escaped Callista's lips before she could stop them, her rifle swinging toward Blackthorn with deadly intent. Now, my dear, no proof of such a scandalous accusation. Though I will say that digitalis can be difficult to detect in a man who already suffered from heart problems. His smile was reptilian. The point is, you both have reasons to hate me, and I have reasons to eliminate you both. Shall we settle this like civilized people? What are you proposing? Gareth asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Single combat. You and me, no weapons, except what God gave us. Winner takes all the ranch, the woman, the future. Loser dies here in the dirt where he belongs. Callista started to protest, but Gareth's sharp look silenced her. She could see him calculating odds, considering options, preparing for what might be his final battle. And if I refuse, then my remaining men burn this place to the ground with everyone in it, including your lovely wife and her unborn child. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Callista's hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach, where she'd only just begun to suspect new life might be growing. She hadn't told Gareth yet, hadn't been certain until this very moment when Blackthorn's words confirmed her suspicions. Gareth's eyes found hers across the distance, and she saw understanding dawn in their gray depths, saw the fierce protectiveness, that had drawn her to him from the beginning flare into something almost feral. "Very well, Marcus, but when I kill you, your men retreat and never return." "Agreed. I rather doubt you'll be in any condition to enforce terms." The two men faced each other in the dusty yard while their followers formed a loose circle around them. Blackthorn was older, but still formidable, his movements suggesting he'd maintained his military conditioning. Gareth was younger and stronger, but he'd been wounded in the earlier fighting. Blood still seeped through his shirt sleeve. They circled each other like predators, looking for openings, testing reflexes. Then Blackthorn struck with surprising speed, his fist connecting with Gareth's injured shoulder and sending him staggering backward. The fight was brutal and decisive. Blackthorn fought with the calculated precision of a man accustomed to winning, while Gareth fought with the desperate fury of a man protecting everything he held dear. They traded blows that would have felled lesser men, neither giving quarter or asking for mercy. In the end, it was Gareth's superior conditioning and younger reflexes that made the difference. When Blackthorn overextended himself with a wild haymaker, Gareth caught his arm and used the older man's momentum to send him crashing to the ground. The sickening crack of breaking bone echoed across the yard as Blackthorn's neck twisted at an impossible angle. Silence fell like a shroud over the ranch. Then, one by one, Blackthorn's surviving men began laying down their weapons and backing away. Their employer was dead, their cause lost, their future uncertain. Within minutes, they were riding away from Willowbrook Valley, never to return. Gareth swayed on his feet, exhausted and battered, but victorious. Callista ran to him, catching him as his knees buckled, her tears falling freely for the first time since this nightmare had begun. "It's over," she whispered against his chest. "It's finally over." "Yes," he agreed, his arms tightening around her. "And now we can start living instead of just surviving." The sound of children's laughter echoed across the valley as Callista watched. From the porch of their expanded ranch house, 4-year-old Ezekiel, named for her father, raced through the grass chasing butterflies, while 2-year-old Cordelia tottered after him on unsteady legs. A third child grew beneath Callista's heart. Due to arrive with the spring flowers, Gareth emerged from the barn, his face creased with smile lines that had replaced the hard edges of his warrior years. The ranch now employed 50 men and their families, turning Willowbrook Valley into a thriving community where children played safely and their parents built futures without fear. "The new schoolhouse is almost finished," he said, settling beside her on the porch swing he'd built with his own hands. "Think you'll be ready to teach again come fall?" "I'm looking forward to it," she replied, leaning into his solid warmth. "Though I suspect our own children will be my most challenging students. They come by their stubbornness honestly." His hand found hers, wedding ring gleaming in the afternoon sun. From both sides, as the sun set over their peaceful valley, Callista reflected on the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as a desperate proposal between strangers had become the foundation of a love story written in courage, sacrifice, and unwavering partnership. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "The violence, the danger we went through?" Gareth considered the question seriously, his eyes following their children as they played in the golden light. "I regret the necessity of it, but I don't regret the outcome. Everything we endured brought us here, to this moment, to this life we've built together. And if you had to do it again..." His answer came without hesitation. "I'd still declare my intentions in that schoolhouse. I'd still fight heaven and hell to keep you safe. And I'd still count myself the luckiest man alive to call you my wife." As night fell over Willowbrook Valley, the Ironstone family gathered in their warm, lamplit home, a fortress no longer, but a sanctuary built on love, defended by determination, and filled with the promise of generations yet to come. The wild love story that had begun with a giant cowboy's bold declaration had become the foundation of a dynasty that would endure long after the last echoes of gunfire had faded from memory. In the end, they had both gotten exactly what they needed. He had found his wife. She had found her strong sons and daughters who would carry their legacy forward into a future bright with endless possibility.